Hello Year 9 and welcome to any parents and carers who may be listening too. I'm Miss Satine and my job is to explain to you what sociology is and what's involved in the GCSE sociology option. So first and foremost, sociology is a social science. You'll all be familiar with traditional science and what would be involved if we were, for instance, performing an experiment in a laboratory. Well, in the case of social scientists, we are observing and researching human behaviour. Now, in my opinion, nothing could be more interesting than that. Sociologists are curious, they're meticulous, observant, good at handling data, and dare I say, we're a little bit nosy about all aspects of human behaviour. For instance, sociologists explore how and why we obey social rules. Each and every day, sometimes knowingly, such as the current guidance on social distancing due to the coronavirus outbreak, but often, much more subtly, we obey those in authority and we obey what other people expect us to do. If you're interested in this, I strongly recommend that you research famous experiments on social conformity such as Solomon Asch and the elevator experiment to get more insight. We'll be looking at a lot of experiments in this subject when we do research methods. So next I'm going to talk to you about the academic tradition of sociology. Sometimes people who are not in the know might write it off as a bit of a soft subject, but they would be wrong. Sociology has an excellent academic tradition right around the globe. It is offered at all of the top universities in the world, including Oxford and Cambridge, and a number of top institutions from the USA too, as shown here. Michelle Obama studied sociology at university, and that helped her when she became First Lady of the United States to develop public health programs relating to children's exercise and healthy eating, and to promote important causes close to her heart, like education. Now, I'm a massive sports fan, Year 9, and I was really interested reading an article about Mario Toji to see that he loves sociology too. He is very interested in a concept that we call inequality. So that's the gap in opportunities that we have between different groups in society, be that because of their social class backgrounds, which is largely down to your income, but also important constructs like race and ethnicity. He's recommended a list of books to read to understand more about this, and it very much fitted in with his particular interest of politics, which he studied at university. Equally, another person I've come across who studies sociology is Richard Osman. You might recognise his face from Pointless and other quizzes, and he's also a very well-known author. So, just goes to show how many people out there are interested in society and all things to do with behaviour. Now let's turn to an important set of skills that sociologists gain and develop. Sociology is definitely not about looking at the society around you and stating the obvious or using common sense. It's about research. And sociologists conduct research about each and every area of social life that you can imagine. So all kinds of different social institutions like the family, the media, the peer group, religion, and so on. And they do this using some terms that you'll recognise, such as primary evidence. So that means going out and collecting the evidence for yourself. Now, depending on the topic, sociologists have to decide which methods are most appropriate. In some cases, let's say we were examining gender in the workplace, interviews might be absolutely appropriate. In other cases, they may use large-scale social surveys or questionnaires. An important example of a large-scale questionnaire you may have heard of is the census. This is conducted every 10 years by the government in order to help them understand the nature of British society and make important decisions relating to how they might spend the income they gain from us in taxes in order to address issues to do with things like housing and transport, for instance. Finally, one of my personal favourite areas is participant observation. In an area of sociology called comparative sociology, theorists may go out into the field. They may, for instance, go out and join a tribe to understand them in more depth and detail, meaning that they would, as much as possible, join in with absolutely everything that the tribe do to gain their understanding. This could be taking part in rituals, and this could be observing lots of different practices that they may not usually do, relating to food, customs and traditions, for instance. In terms of careers and higher education, sociology is an excellent choice if you're interested in law. Last year, several of our students went on to study law at Russell Group universities, which was absolutely wonderful, and law's one of the most popular destinations of sociology graduates across the country. Equally, in teaching, sociology is very useful, and we study education as a whole topic, examining important issues like differential achievement according to people's social class, ethnicity or gender, education policies, and the different types of schools that exist in the UK. The NHS is a critical area in terms of sociology. Understanding health and patterns of inequality, so for instance how males, females, certain ethnic groups experience different patterns and incidences of disease and even different life expectancies, are important areas that you will learn about if you decide to train to be a nurse or a doctor in the future. The police force is another area where we've been delighted to see our students enter, having done our subject. In terms of the police force, we examine in depth and detail crime and deviance, which is often one of students' favourite topics. So how will you know if this subject is for you? Here are some examples of the kinds of things you may already be interested in, which will connect with our subject. First and foremost, if you like watching the news, if you're into current affairs, there are tons of things that you can use to both support and to criticise the evidence of sociologists. For instance, functionalists are an important group of sociologists who argue that society is like the body, that we need all of the different areas of society to work together to make it function well as a whole. A great example of functionalism has been observed by us all on Thursdays when we go out at 8 o'clock and we clap and we bang our pots and pans to celebrate the importance of the NHS. That's really moving and important for me in particular because my dad was a surgeon in the NHS for many years. Those types of acts of collective social solidarity are really important to understanding societies. Equally, inequality is an important area that you may already be interested in, whether that's through the Justice for Grenfell, where we've seen some of our poorest members of society failed in a number of ways with regards to the standards of their housing, the BBC with their issues concerning gender and pay. A number of leading female journalists have fought them and won where they've been paid less than men who were doing the same job. Now, I love a good documentary, and I know many of you will too. It has never been easier to access gritty and varied topics relevant to sociology for our students. There are lots of documentaries relating to crime. So, for instance, the whole series that Trevor McDonald has done inside some of the toughest prisons in the world, Women Behind Bars being a particularly useful one. There are documentaries on BBC Three, which have a particular emphasis on young people and the issues that they face, which is very relevant to our studies on age. Louis Theroux has done some incredibly interesting documentaries where he actually lives with the people that he's learning about, which again is quite sociological in terms of how he gathers data, as well as having lots of different topics relating to different ways of life and different family structures. Rich House, Poor House is another one that's quite popular at the moment, which really shows us, side by side, the differences in people's lifestyles and the way in which people's income can affect what they can access in our society today. Now I'd like to talk to you about the structure of the exam and some of the most important topics. So there are 2 exam papers for GCSE Sociology, both of which are 1 hour and 45 minutes. The papers include a broad selection of questions of different lengths, including lots of short answer questions, matching tops and tails with key terms and definitions, for instance, building up to a few key essay questions, one of those being 12 marks and 3 of them being 15 marks in length. And if you've done subjects where you argue on the one hand, on the other hand, overall, against a particular view or claim, you'll already have a foundation for the skills that are necessary. Culture, socialisation and identity is the very important topic that we look at on paper 1. Culture is the way of life of a society. Socialisation is how we learn how to behave and fit into our culture, firstly in the family, in primary socialisation, but then in education, through the workplace, through the media, religion and other important institutions. And identity is how we see ourselves and how others see us. So some of the things we'll look at in terms of identity is how identities have changed over time. Let's take gender for instance. So a generation ago, we wouldn't have had young males like the metrosexuals, people like Joey Essex or the lads from Love Island. These young men are taking a significant interest in their appearance. They're spending lots of time and products on that appearance. And in the past, we would have only really seen females objectified in this way. We'll examine how and why that's come about. The media is very important in terms of eating disorders as well. So one key debate we'll examine is the extent to which these unrealistic extremes of body shapes are now presented to us, and whether that's connected to increases in eating disorders, bulimia increasing in males in particular, and young men becoming addicted to exercise and steroid use in the UK. Finally, we'll flip gender on its head and consider how we have different expectations in different cultures. For instance, in the bottom right corner of the screen, you should be able to see the Jerewol ceremony, which is where, in a particular tribe in Africa, men compete in a beauty contest in order to find lovers. The first depth study on paper 1 is the sociology of the family. Families have become increasingly diverse in the UK. One of the key reasons for this is our staggeringly high divorce rate. Sorry folks, but we have the highest divorce rate in Europe, with 42% of families ending in divorce. Now, whilst divorce is a difficult issue, many people go on to remarry or to form blended or reconstituted step families. And lots of us find that those families function just as well as a traditional nuclear family. Families have had to change for reasons concerning the role of women. So with 2/3 of all mothers in the UK today in paid employment, some of the roles that traditionally would have gone to the male in a heterosexual couple as the breadwinner have had to change, with men doing more childcare today. In some cases, men might be house husbands, with the woman going out full-time to work and the father staying at home and looking after the children. With changes in the law, we have same-sex couple families who may and may not be married. And 1% of those couples will adopt children, which brings about some interesting issues to negotiate in a much more equal society that is tolerant, but may still have to overcome obstacles. We'll also look at diversity in terms of ethnicity. So as well as understanding the slight differences in South Asian family structures, who tend to be multi-generational, we'll also look at how and why it is that we are a society with an increasing number of interracial marriages. And we're a real success story when it comes to interracial relationships in the UK. And that's something that many of us recognise or are even part of in our society. The second depth topic on paper 1 is the sociology of education. Now, in an area like Gloucestershire, you might be fooled into thinking that grammar schools are the norm. In fact, there are only 163 grammar schools in the whole country. So Gloucestershire and Kent have lots of grammar schools, but they're pretty much scattered around everywhere else, with the majority of people going to a state school, which means a school funded by the government, which is comprehensive in its intake, meaning that it takes students of all abilities, just like St Peter's. We'll examine some of the issues around having so many different types of schools and why some of those schools appear to get better attainment than others. Is that fair? Should we have choice for parents, or should we try to give everybody a really equal or level playing field in terms of education? We'll look at education policy. So the current Education Secretary is Gavin Williamson, and we will look back to 1988 and work our way forwards in terms of seeing how key changes have been made to the school curriculum. Some of those changes have arguably advantaged girls, and since the 1990s, girls have outperformed boys, although the gap has begun to narrow once more. We'll also consider the influence that teachers have on our education. Yes, we're here to educate, but sociologists would argue we also, in terms of some of our stereotypes and some of our assumptions about groups, perhaps contribute to some groups doing better than others in a way that isn't down to the individual's capabilities. So currently, ethnic minorities such as Chinese and Indian students are the top performers in education, whereas Pakistani and Bangladeshi pupils and pupils from traveller communities get the lowest attainment. Sociologists would say that isn't just down to natural ability. There are things happening both inside and outside of school that create those social trends. These are just some of the things you'll learn about in the sociology of education. Last but by no means least, it's the sociology of crime. Lots of students find that crime is their favourite topic, and I really enjoy teaching it too. So this topic explores the criminal justice system in a lot of depth and detail. You're going to learn about the structure of the court system in the UK and how the court systems help us to deal with the problem of crime. You'll learn about the police and how policing has changed with a whole series of different expectations placed on officers and key decisions they have to make in terms of who to arrest and how they go about policing the streets. We'll look at the patterns of different types of crime according to ethnicity, gender, age and social class. Presently, more lower class people commit crime than wealthy people. More males commit crime than females. Young people commit more crime than older people. And ethnic minority groups such as African Caribbean males and Asian males commit more crime than other ethnic groups. Or so the figures say. Our job will be to explore how and why crime has those different patterns, what it is about people's experiences in society that may make them more likely to be criminal, and equally how and why the police may create these differences in terms of who they choose to arrest and what they choose to investigate. Racism in the police is an issue that we'll look at, which is quite controversial but very important. And we'll also look at the way in which females who commit crimes such as murder are demonised. Why is it that we treat female murderers differently from male murderers? And what is it about the way that we socialise women from the outset in childhood that means that they are less likely to commit some types of crimes than others? These are the types of issues we'll look at, as well as considering whether or not prisons and the government are effective in tackling the problem of crime. Year 9, thank you so much for listening. I hope that I've been able to share with you as much as possible about what sociology is, why you might find it interesting, and what you'll actually learn and study. Some of you may find that it just doesn't quite work out for you to take it at GCSE, but a reminder that you don't have to have studied sociology at GCSE to take it to A level. And so I might be teaching some of you in a few years' time rather than next year. If you're thinking about the future already and would like to know what sociology fits in with, I've got these pieces of the puzzle in front of you so you can get an idea about how it might fit in. Most importantly, take your time making your options choices. The very best of luck and enjoy all of your choices for the future. Thank you very much.